She tried to cancel my wedding cake and steal the refund, pretending to be me. But what she didn't know was that the baker refused to cooperate, and that single phone call exposed something much bigger than just a wedding problem. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a hospital nurse. I always believed that if you work hard and stay responsible, life eventually becomes stable. But sometimes the biggest problems don't come from strangers. They come from the people you trust the most. This is the story of how my own sister tried to sabotage my wedding, and how one honest baker helped me discover the truth. The moment my wedding baker called me asking why I wanted to cancel my cake order, I knew someone in my family had crossed a line I never thought anyone would dare cross. And the worst part was that the person pretending to be me was my own sister. I'm 32 years old and I work as a hospital nurse, and I built my life slowly, working night shifts, saving every extra dollar, and trying to stay independent, because growing up in my family, independence was always treated like betrayal. My younger sister, Melissa, had always been dramatic and unpredictable, but I never imagined she would try to sabotage my wedding just because she felt left behind. Before I continue, I always wonder where people are listening from when they hear stories like this. So if you are hearing this right now, I am honestly curious what country or what time of day it is for you, because when all this happened, it felt like my world had completely stopped, while everything else kept moving normally. I had been planning my wedding for almost a year, and the cake was something I cared about more than I expected, maybe because it symbolized stability, something I had worked very hard to create after years of family chaos. The baker was a small business owner named Karen who ran a quiet shop about 20 minutes from my apartment. She was kind, organized, and very professional, and she kept detailed notes of every meeting, which later turned out to matter more than I realized at the time. She sounded confused on the phone and told me someone claiming to be me had called twice asking to cancel the order and get a refund, and that person even knew the wedding date and flavor details, which made my stomach drop immediately because that information was not public. Only close family knew those details. I assured her I never called, and she said she believed me because the caller sounded rushed and defensive, while I had always been calm and clear during our meetings. And that was the first moment I felt both grateful and deeply uneasy, because if she had believed the caller, my cake would have been gone, and I would never even know why. I hung up and sat quietly in my kitchen, staring at my phone. And there was only one person who had both the information and the personality to do something like that. Melissa had always struggled with money and attention, and over the years she had borrowed small amounts from me, promising to pay it back, and sometimes she did, but many times she did not, and I usually let it go because I did not want arguments, especially after our parents started relying on me to keep the peace. Melissa still lived in our childhood home with our mother, and she constantly complained that life was unfair and that I had abandoned the family, even though I visited often and helped financially whenever I could. When I got engaged, she congratulated me, but I could see something tense behind her smile, and she kept making little comments about how weddings were a waste of money and how people who showed off deserved to regret it. And at first, I brushed those remarks aside because Melissa always said things without thinking. But now, sitting there replaying the baker's words in my mind, I started to connect those moments in a way that made me uncomfortable. I did not want to accuse her without proof, because once accusations start in a family, they rarely stop, and I had spent years trying to avoid exactly that kind of conflict. But deep down, something told me this was not random, and if Melissa was willing to interfere with something as important as my wedding, then I needed to understand how far she was willing to go before it became worse. For a few days after the call, I tried to act normal, but my thoughts kept circling back to the same question. Why would Melissa try to cancel my wedding cake, and what exactly was she hoping to gain? Because it did not make sense unless there was something more behind it. And the more I thought about our history, the more I realized that Melissa had always reacted badly whenever I reached a stable point in life. When I finished nursing school, she accused me of thinking I was better than everyone. When I bought my first car, she joked that I must have stolen the money. And when I moved into my apartment, she cried, saying I was abandoning the family, even though I was only 15 minutes away at the time. I told myself she was just insecure, and I kept helping whenever she asked because I believed supporting family was the right thing to do. But slowly, that support turned into expectations, and those expectations turned into pressure, especially financially. Melissa often asked for money with emotional stories about emergencies, and I usually sent what I could afford because I did not want her to struggle. But sometimes, months later, I would hear her talk about shopping trips or weekend outings that did not match the financial crises she described, and I ignored those inconsistencies because confronting them felt exhausting. After the call from Karen, I decided I needed to be careful and think logically instead of emotionally. So I called the bakery again and asked politely if they kept records of phone calls or messages. Karen told me she wrote notes after every business call, and she still had the numbers that contacted her. When she read the number out loud, my chest tightened. Tightened because it matched Melissa's phone exactly, and hearing that confirmed what I already suspected. But instead of reacting immediately, I thanked Karen and asked her not to cancel anything unless she spoke directly to me in person. She agreed without hesitation, which reassured me that at least the cake was safe for now. That evening, I sat with my fiancé, Daniel, and explained everything. And he listened quietly without interrupting, and when I finished, he said something simple that shifted my thinking. He said, "If she is doing this now, what will she do next?" And that question stayed in my mind because he was right. This might not stop with a cake. And for the first time, I realized avoiding conflict might actually allow bigger problems to grow. So instead of calling Melissa in anger, I decided to gather more information. First, I checked my email and bank notifications to make sure nothing else had been touched. And thankfully, everything looked normal. But I changed all my passwords anyway and enabled extra security because I suddenly felt exposed in a way I never had before. A few days later, Melissa texted me casually, asking about wedding plans and acting completely normal. And that calm tone almost felt more disturbing than if she had been openly hostile, because it meant she thought she could do things behind my back without consequences. And that realization pushed me toward a decision I had avoided for years. I needed proof, and I needed to confront this properly, not emotionally, not impulsively, but in a way that would make it impossible for her to deny what she had done. The turning point came when I asked Karen if she would be willing to help me confirm what was happening, and she agreed immediately because she said small businesses deal with fake cancellations and scams more often than people realize, and she did not like the idea of someone impersonating a customer. So we made a simple plan. The next time Melissa called, Karen would act cooperative and suggest that a refund required confirmation in person, and I would be there waiting quietly to see what happened. It felt strange planning something like that against my own sister, but by that point, I knew ignoring the situation would only encourage it. And 2 days later, Karen called me saying someone claiming to be me had contacted the shop again asking about the refund process, and my heart started racing, even though I had expected it. Daniel came with me to the bakery, and we waited in a small back room while Karen worked at the counter. About 30 minutes later, the door opened, and I heard Melissa's voice immediately, even before seeing her. And for a moment, I just stood there, feeling a mix of sadness and anger, because hearing her talk confidently, as if she had every right to be there, made everything feel painfully real. Karen asked polite questions, and Melissa explained that she wanted the cake order canceled because plans had changed. And when Karen mentioned needing identification, Melissa hesitated, and that hesitation confirmed everything. Then Karen nodded and said she would bring the paperwork and walked toward the back room where Daniel and I were waiting. And that was the moment I knew there was no turning back. When we stepped out, Melissa's face changed instantly from confidence to shock, and she froze like she could not process what she was seeing. I asked calmly why she was pretending to be me. And at first, she tried to laugh it off, saying it was just a misunderstanding, but Karen quietly showed her the phone number records and notes from previous calls. And Melissa started talking faster, saying she only wanted to help because weddings were stressful and I might have changed my mind, but none of it sounded convincing. And finally, she admitted she had hoped to get the deposit refunded because she needed money urgently. Hearing that felt like something heavy settle in my chest because it meant this was not just jealousy or attention, it was deliberate planning. Daniel spoke firmly and asked if she realized impersonating someone for financial gain was serious, and Melissa looked panicked for the first time and said she never thought it would go that far. Karen explained that she documented everything and that businesses had the right to report attempted fraud, and the word fraud seemed to hit Melissa harder than anything else because her voice dropped and she started apologizing repeatedly. But by then, the damage was done, and I knew the situation could not be solved with another quiet forgiveness like before. After that confrontation, I went home feeling exhausted, but strangely clear-minded, because for the first time in years, I had faced Melissa without backing down, and instead of chaos, there was simply truth laid out in front of everyone. Karen later told me she filed a report about the attempted impersonation, mainly to protect her business records, and although nothing dramatic happened legally, Melissa was contacted for a statement which forced her to admit what she had done to more than just me. And that exposure changed the way our family saw the situation, because before that day, Melissa always controlled the story. But now there were records, notes, and witnesses that made denial impossible. Our mother called me asking why things had become so serious, and for once, I explained everything calmly instead of minimizing it, and she did not defend Melissa the way she usually did, which showed me how much clearer the truth looked when it was documented instead of emotional. Melissa avoided me for weeks, and when she finally sent a message, it was shorter and quieter than anything she had written before. She said she was sorry and that she knew she had crossed a line, and although part of me still felt hurt, another part felt relieved because the constant tension between helping and protecting myself was finally gone. The wedding day came and the cake stood exactly where it was supposed to, untouched and beautiful. And when I saw it, I realized it represented more than just a celebration. It represented a boundary I had finally defended. Life after the wedding became calmer because I stopped offering automatic help and instead made decisions carefully. And surprisingly, that distance made our relationship less dramatic because Melissa no longer expected unlimited support and I no longer felt trapped by guilt. Sometimes I think about how close I came to ignoring the first warning sign and how easily the situation could have become worse if Karen had not questioned the cancellation request. And that thought reminds me how important it is to pay attention when something feels wrong. If you made it this far listening to my story, I honestly would like to know where you are watching from and what time it is where you are, because when I tell the story, it reminds me how many people quietly deal with family pressure without talking about it. And I would also like to know what you think or what lesson you take from this experience, because for me, the lesson was simple but powerful. Respecting family does not mean allowing yourself to be used. And sometimes protecting your future means saying no, even when it feels uncomfortable. And learning that changed my life in a way I wish I had understood much earlier. And honestly, after everything that happened, I learned that setting boundaries is not selfish. Sometimes it is the only way to protect your future. If you listen to this story till the end, I would really like to know where you are watching from and what time it is in your country. And tell me something else, too. What would you have done if your own family tried to betray you like this?